What we have been able to show over the last year is that Superhuman users now send and respond to 72% more emails per hour. So they are literally working 72% faster compared to before using Superhuman. AI native means that you have rethought the workflows and rebuilt the surfaces and the interaction points from the ground up, genuinely from scratch, not just bolting them on top of an existing application. It's difficult for a company like Microsoft or Google to take what they've done, completely disassemble it, and rebuild it from the ground up, asking themselves, if you were to build these applications today, what would they look like? That's actually just really hard for any large organization to do. But that's exactly the kind of thing that we are doing at Superhuman. And for me, product market fit is the number one reason why startups succeed. The lack of it is also the number one reason why startups fail. You can almost always feel it when product market fit is not happening.
Hey, this is Carlos, CEO at Product School and your host on the Product Podcast. Today's guest is Rahul Vora, CEO at Superhuman Mail. Rahul is a rare builder CEO, the architect behind the world's fastest email engine, and the mind that productized product market fit into a repeatable science. Following a major acquisition by Grammarly in 2024, Rahul is now steering the shift toward a truly AI-native productivity ecosystem. The scale of Superhuman's impact is objective. Users respond to 72% more emails per hour and save an average of 4 hours every single week. Rahul's real impact is his editor approach to product design. He famously navigated a 3-year coding desert to find the data-driven signals that predict growth before it happens. In our conversation, we skip the fluff and get into the weeds of the 40% very disappointed metric that turns product market fit into a numerical certainty, why Rahul ignores most user feedback to focus purely on the high expectation customer, how to balance technical magic with objective killing features so you never get outcompeted, why Rahul only needs 20 verbatim quotes to interpret the truth and push his teams to their limits. This is a masterclass in the science of building products people actually want. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Product Podcast, Rahul.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
I don't have too many CEOs on the Product Podcast, and that's by design. Because I think CEOs have a lot of platforms out there, but in my heart, you're a special one. You are also a builder, and I hope we can have like a deep conversation on how to actually build real shit.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Happy to go as deep as you want to go.
Well, maybe start with from some of the latest news. So as founder and CEO of Superhuman, got acquired by the now Superhuman. So maybe you can explain that story and how that new name is coming about.
Absolutely. So for those that don't know me, I founded the company that was originally called Superhuman almost 11 years ago at this point, back in 2014. And for most of the last 11 years, Superhuman has been the most productive email experience ever made. Most of our customers get to their inbox twice as fast as before. They respond faster to the things that matter, and they save 4 hours or more every single week. And about halfway through last year, we were acquired by Grammarly, which I think came as a surprise to many people. Grammarly, of course, is mostly known for language and spelling and grammar. But when you start to look into the deal, it makes a ton of sense. So maybe I can share, this might be interesting for folks, how the deal came about and why it makes sense for Grammarly, why it makes sense for Superhuman, and anything else that sparks your interest. How does that sound?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. We were actually just talking about Shashir, who is the CEO of Grammarly, now Superhuman, before we started recording. And I also met him many years ago, back in 2017. Back then, he was the co-founder and the CEO of Coda. And we were both at a conference, and it was one of those special moments when nobody else was around. So we could get into some really deep conversation. Shout out to the Lobby conference put on by David Hornick over at Lobby Capital. He and the team do an amazing job. It's a great place to meet some fantastic people. And as you probably know, back then for Superhuman, we only did one-on-one VIP concierge onboardings. There was no way to get access to the product in a self-service way. You actually had to meet with one of us. And back then, it was specifically me. I onboarded the first 500 or so customers of Superhuman. So I onboarded Shashir right there and then, right by the pool. There was nobody else there. It was just him and me. I think we both were drinking margaritas. And I was like, let me show you what I've built. By the way, it turns out he, as you know, he worked at YouTube. But before that, he used to work at Microsoft. And of all things at Microsoft, he used to work on Microsoft Outlook. So I was like, boy, do I have a product for you. And as those who've gone through these onboardings know, one of the very last steps is when I ask people to close Gmail. And when he was moving his mouse over to the Gmail tab, another tab caught my eye, which is an app called Krypton. And I asked him, what is Krypton? And Shashir then proceeded to give me the best product demo that I'd honestly seen all year. It was a document, but it was also a spreadsheet. It was also a database. It was a collaboration tool. It was a mini app builder. And then Krypton eventually renamed to become Coda. And of course, late last year, Grammarly acquired Coda. Now, in that acquisition announcement, when Grammarly was acquiring Coda, Shashir actually wrote a blog post and he said, I watched the foundational capabilities of AI change just about how every tool and surface operates, and I started drafting my 2025 planning memo for the team. I titled it the AI Native Productivity Suite. And my jaw kind of hit the floor because at Superhuman, our vision has always been to build the AI native productivity suite. Email, of course, is a critical part of that suite, and it's where we decided to start. It's also a much bigger problem than most people realize. There are roughly 1 billion professionals in the world, and on average, we spend 3 hours a day in email. So that's 3 billion hours every single day, or north of 1 trillion hours every single year. In fact, we spend more time in email than any other work app. So Shir and I caught up, and over several conversations, it became very clear that we have the same vision, which is to build the AI native productivity suite of choice. It turned out through those conversations that email actually also sits at the heart of where Grammarly is used today. For professionals, email is actually the number one use case for Grammarly, and Grammarly helps people write more than 50 million emails every single week.
That is a crazy story. I've never seen anything like that where companies get acquired, take the name, the founders stay, everybody's a builder. I met Shishir also when he was at YouTube. I had him on the podcast many years ago. I also had Noam, CPO at Grammarly, on the podcast after the Coda acquisition, but before the Superhuman Mail acquisition. So happy to have all of you as builders and kind of learn different perspectives. I mean, one thing that caught my attention as a founder myself is what is the real motivation to stay at a larger org, even though you align on the vision, but still it's not your baby anymore. So how are you now? How do you fit into this new structure?
It's funny that you say it's not my baby anymore. In many ways, it feels more like my baby than it ever did. And I think that is actually in large part due to the renaming. I still care. I mean, you have also been a founder, so you know how much founders care. And I still care so much, more than I ever have, about Superhuman, our legacy, our brand. What are we building in this world? What impact are we making? Why are we here? What are we even doing? I care so tremendously much about all of that. And it's a very deep, visceral care. Honestly, in a way that I didn't quite have when I sold my last company, Reportive, to LinkedIn. It was a very different acquisition, orders of magnitude, difference in terms of size of team, size of outcome, the importance of the brand, the number of users, all of that stuff. So this one really is sort of deeply set, and it still very much feels like my baby in many different ways. But there's also just like the reality that it's really exciting. And one of the most exciting things about this deal is having access to significantly greater resources. Since joining, we've invested more than ever in AI and in our core email experience. We've been building out our calendar experience. Down the line, we'll build tasks. Soon you'll see us start to connect these things very beautifully together. And we're also creating a new way of working with AI agents, agents that we know will free all of us up to be more creative, more strategic, and closer to achieving our human potential. So for all of those reasons, it's super exciting.
I want to unpack two keywords that you have in kind of headline of your company. You said AI native productivity suite. So AI native first. Like, I want to know from the bottom of your heart, right? Like, what does that really mean, and how is that different than other companies that still use the term AI native, but it's mostly for marketing purposes?
This is such a great question, and I think one that probably warrants a lot broader discussion. I wish more people were asking this question, and everyone's going to give you a somewhat different answer. I think for me, AI native means that you have rethought the workflows and rebuilt the surfaces and the interaction points from the ground up, genuinely from scratch, not just bolting them on top of an existing application. And a good example is if you take a look at Gemini or Copilots, to pick on the sort of the two biggest companies building in AI, they are genuinely bolt-ons. Gemini is bolted on to Gmail. Copilot is bolted on to all of the various Microsoft Office applications. And by the way, it turns out it's actually a different Copilot that's been bolted on to each of them. It's difficult for a company like Microsoft or Google to take what they've done, completely disassemble it, and rebuild it from the ground up, asking themselves, if you were to build these applications today, what would they look like? That's actually just really hard for any large organization to do. But that's exactly the kind of thing that we are doing at Superhuman, and that's what I mean by AI native.
And then the other piece is productivity. I've seen so many SaaS companies that try to claim that you are going to be more productive by using our tool. And the reality is, in many cases, you end up adding one more tool and having this fake sense of productivity, but in reality, you're still not getting the most important things done. So I heard you talk a little bit about number of hours saved, but I would also love to learn a little bit more in detail on how you actually measure that type of productivity as a way to influence executives to choose to buy your tool.
Yeah, so I think you're asking two different questions. Or rather, maybe the one question, but they have two different answers, which is how do we measure the productivity gain? And then how do you turn those measurements into a pitch or into a sales process with an executive? Now, we're fortunate that our users have wholly embraced AI. There are certainly product categories and industries where that isn't the case. But for our users and in our space, it's a deep embracing of AI. And over the last 2 years, we have seen the percentage of emails that were sent with AI increase by a factor of 5 to 6x. So think about that. The number of emails or the percentage of emails sent that were written with AI has increased by a factor of 5 to 6x. And that's a very easy thing to measure. I would argue that there's a similar metric for every single product. For the longest time, we've used emails sent and percentage of emails sent from Superhuman as our measure of work done. Not emails read, not emails triaged, not actions taken within the app. These are all interesting numbers to look at, and they're useful in their own right. But the measure of work done, emails sent. And now the percentage of that increasing sent with AI. So that's something that we're very clearly able to see. The other really cool thing about Superhuman, we may be unique in this regard, is that we can measure the behavior of users before using Superhuman and compare that to the behavior of users after Superhuman. We can see how responsive you are. We can see how fast you send emails. We can see a whole bunch of other things. And that's just because it's there in the log of how you do email. And what we have been able to show over the last year is that Superhuman users now send and respond to 72% more emails per hour. So they are literally working 72% faster compared to before using Superhuman. And that is plain for anybody to see. It's literally in your email inbox. It's in your sent mail folder.
And full disclosure, I've been using Superhuman forever. And I definitely see the value as someone who gets flooded with emails. But to play devil's advocate, my intention is not to respond more emails. It's actually to not spend too much time there and hopefully spend it on other things. I always think of my email inbox as playing defense. And and then use Slack, for example, for internal communications, or even my inbox, but to communicate with customers as plain often. So how are you thinking about using metrics in a way that they are truly giving you the truth?
Yeah. Well, I think the metric I outlined has proven to be, in conversations with customers, extremely powerful. To see that people are doing work 72% faster is a huge uplift. And our most sophisticated customers actually do their own case studies on Superhuman. We now work with one of the big three strategy consulting firms, and just over a year ago, they evaluated hundreds of AI products, and they only bought two at scale. One was ChatGPT, and the other was Superhuman. And because they're a strategy consulting firm, they of course ran an internal case study, and they found that with Superhuman, they are saving 3.3 hours per person every week. That's actual time saved. They're responding 3.6 hours faster, both internally and externally to customers, and they're doing 1.6x the email, so slightly slower than the 72% number, but still 60% more work happening. In other words, that's half a day faster. And no other tool is actually giving them that kind of outcome. So when we talk about the impact it has on the business, and remember, this is a consulting firm, it goes without saying that if you're trying to work a book of business, you're trying to close customers, you're trying to retain those customers, you're trying to grow those accounts, you're trying to sell new projects, responsiveness and productivity is super important. Now, imagine you're the CEO of this company and you're zooming out of just customer interaction, but you're looking at how all the people in the firm are communicating with each other. The speed at which the firm moves simply boils down to how fast people are communicating and collaborating.
Totally. I still remember those days. I want to forget, but I still remember those days where like people were CCing others. And then there's always one person that is not in copy. That happens to be the person that needs to read the email the most, or the boss is in copy and everybody's waiting for the boss to respond because they don't know who is supposed to answer first. I think all of those things are definitely giving a lot of productivity gains. One other thing is to switch gears a little bit here, Rahul, is given the amount of users that are using your product, like as you think about prioritizing what to invest in next, like how do you actually know who to listen to?
It depends on the stage of the product. And as you know, I've worked a lot on product market fit, and at Superhuman, we even built our very own product market fit engine, which I'm happy to dive into. Folks might find that useful. But it's very different when you're just starting out compared to when you're at scale. So what altitude of answer would you like?
Maybe we can start with the different phases, right? Like as you try to find product market fit all the way to where you are today.
Okay, great. So please feel free to jump in whenever. This can be a long conversation. So as folks may know, at Superhuman, we built our very own product market fit engine. And what this engine does is it gives you a way to define product market fit. It gives you a metric to measure product market fit. And it even gives you a methodology to increase product market fit and can write your roadmap for you. And this is a roadmap that is basically guaranteed to take you to product market fit over time. And at this point, it's probably helpful to take a quick step back and ask, well, what even is product market fit? These are very big claims. And for me, product market fit is the number one reason why startups succeed. The lack of it is also the number one reason why startups fail. And it's helpful to look at what various folks in the startup community have said about it. So Paul Graham, for example, would say it's when you made something that people want. Sam Altman would say it's when users spontaneously tell other people to use your product. Mark Andreessen, though, has what I think is the most vivid definition. He would say you can almost always feel it when product market fit is not happening. Customers aren't quite getting value, users aren't growing that fast, word of mouth isn't spreading, the press reviews are kind of blah, and the sales cycle takes too damn long. But you can almost always feel it when product market fit is happening because customers are buying as fast as you can add servers. You're hiring sales and support as fast as you can. Reporters are constantly calling you about your hot new thing. Investors are staking out your house and money is piling up in your checking account. And that is indeed a vivid definition, but it is one that I was staring at through tears in the summer of 2017 because it seemed so subjective, so unactionable. What do you do if by that definition you don't have product market fit? Indeed, I began to wonder, can you measure product market fit? Because if you can, then maybe you can optimize it. Maybe you can systematically, even numerically increase product market fit. And it turns out the answer is yes. You can measure product market fit and you can optimize it. And so it was the summer of 2015, 10 years ago now, and we'd started much like any other software company by writing code. And in the summer of 2016, we were still coding. And in the summer of 2017, we were still coding. And I felt this intense, incredible pressure to launch, both from the team, but also from within myself. Because after all, my last company, Reportive, had launched, scaled, and been acquired in less time. And here we were 2 years in, and we still had not launched. But deep down inside, I knew that no matter how intensely I felt this pressure, that a launch would go very badly. I did not believe that we had product market fit. And although I knew it, I couldn't just say that to the team because these are super ambitious, hyper intelligent engineers. They poured their hearts and their souls into the product. So I needed a plan. And in April of 2017, I started my search for the holy grail for a way to define product's market fit, for a metric to measure it, and for a methodology to systematically increase it. I searched high and low. I read everything I could find. I spoke with all the experts. And then I came across a person that our audience today may know, Sean Ellis, because Sean ran growth in the early days at Dropbox, LogMeIn, Eventbrite. He coined the term growth hacker. And in doing so, he found a leading indicator of product market fit, one that is benchmarked and predictive. You just ask your users this: how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And then you measure the percent who answer very disappointed. Give them three possible answers. Not disappointed, they wouldn't like they would not be disappointed if they could no longer use the product, somewhat, and very disappointed, meaning they love the product. And after benchmarking hundreds of startups, Sean found that the companies that struggle to grow almost always got less than 40% very disappointed, whereas the companies that grew most easily almost always got more than 40%. In other words, if more than 40% of your users would be very disappointed without your product, then you have initial product market fit. Now, this metric is more objective than a feeling. It predicts success better than the Net Promoter Score, and it is not only the best way to measure product market fit, you can actually use it to develop what we call a product market fit engine, which gives you a methodology for systematically increasing it and generating a roadmap. And there are several steps which I'm happy to get into, and it really gets to the nuance that you asked, which is, how do you figure out who to listen to and who not to listen to? And that turns out to be key to all of this. And the steps are surveying and analyzing the results and building a methodology. But I'll take your lead. Do you want to get into that, or do you want to talk about building at scale?
No. Let's go. I think this is the beautiful thing about it. You were able to figure out product market fit. Took you long, which I think also speaks to the testament of like not giving up. It's very hard, almost impossible to get it right the first time. Now you're at a phase where objectively you're post product market fit, but still this game never gets any easier, right? So how are you constantly figuring out what is the next growth lever? And for that, you need to have figured out who you want to listen to.
Exactly. Okay, so then let's take it from the perspective of a startup. This is the phase when, of course, it is the hardest. Step one is survey. And you email these 4 questions to every user. Number 1, how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? 3 possible answers: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed. Number 2, what type of people do you think would most benefit from the product? Number 3, what is the main benefit you receive from the product? And number 4, how can we improve the product for you? And the last 3 questions, they just have open-ended answers, so just a text box where people can write their opinions. And you should wait until users have experienced the core value proposition of your product. If this was, for example, Uber, I would wait until just after they've had their first ride and they've experienced frictionless transportation without payment. If it was Airbnb, I would wait until just after the first stay. At Superhuman, we wait until around 2-ish weeks in and they've sent a minimum number of emails, enough that we know they've experienced the core value proposition of the experience. And then you analyze the results to question number 1. And for Superhuman Mail, in the summer of 2017, we ended up with 22% very disappointed. We clearly did not have product market fit. Now, that may seem sad, but at least I could explain the situation to the team. And most excitingly, I could explain that I had a plan to reliably increase the product market fit score. So that then brings us on to step 2 of the engine. So step 1 is survey, step 2 is segment. We want to understand who are the people who really love our product. And I like to use the concept of the high expectation customer, which is a concept that I learned from Julie Supan. Now, Julie led early marketing at Dropbox, Airbnb, and many other great companies. The HXC is the most discerning person in your demographic. They will enjoy your product for its greatest benefit and they will spread the word. Most importantly, when you think about viral growth, others want to be like them because the HXC seems clever, judicious, and insightful. Now, how do you go about creating your HXC? Well, you can do this directly from the data. Take the users who would be very disappointed without your product and analyze their answers to question number 2. And as a reminder, that is, who do you think this is best for? This is a very powerful question because it turns out that happy users will almost always describe themselves, but they will do so using the words that matter most to them. And you can then turn those words into a rich and a detailed description of your own HXC. So I'll give you the Superhuman example. We call the HXC Nicole. Nicole is a hardworking professional who deals with many people. They may be an executive, a founder, an investor, a manager, a leader. They work long hours, often into the weekend, and they consider themselves very busy. They wish they had more time. Nicole feels she is productive. She's self-aware enough to realize she could be better, and occasionally she'll investigate ways to improve. Now, obviously, she spends much of her day in her inbox. On a typical day, she'll read 100, 200 emails, and she'll send about 40. On a very busy day, she might send as many as 80 or 100. Now, critically, Nicole considers it part of her job to be responsive. She actually prides herself on being so, because she knows that being unresponsive could block her team, damage her reputation, or cause missed opportunities. And it goes on and on and on. I have a few more paragraphs of what the HXC is. And you can use the answer to that question to create your own HXC. But
Rahul,
now,
I was going to
yeah,
say, there's a lot of people in this audience that will identify with Nicole.
great. Well, guys, check out Superhuman. You're going to save 4 hours every week. But it doesn't stop there. This is just figuring out a highest expectation customer. And, we're all products people watching or listening to this. This is not the same as ICP. Remember, this is the highest expectation customer, the most discerning customer, and also the people that most of your other users aspire to be like. The next step is to use this to narrow the market. So you go back to your surveys and you take each response and you assign a persona to each one. So in the early days of Superhuman, we had founders using it, we had executives, we had business development people, but we also had engineers and salespeople, customer support, data science, and so on. And here's the magic. You take the users who most love your product, those who would be very disappointed without your product, and you use them to narrow the market. So in my simplified example, let's say we're going to focus on founders, managers, executives, and business development, and we deliberately ignore sales, customer success, engineering, and data science. We take them out of the data set. Just by segmenting, our product market fit score jumped by 10% from 22% to 32%. That's just by segmenting. You've just said, what if we didn't focus on these folks as the market, but we instead focused on these folks, the one who scored highly anyway? I think most people forget this about product market fit. There's actually two pieces, product and market. We rotate around changing the product because that's what we do all day as product people. But it's way easier to change the market. You don't have to change the product. Just by deciding to change the market, our PMF score jumped by 10%. Now, we were not quite at 40% yet, but we made significant progress in just 2 or 3 minutes. That brings us then to step 3 of the engine, which is to analyze. So we need to understand two things. Number one, why do people love our product? And number two, what holds people back from loving our product? We already understand who loves our product. So to understand why, we go back to our survey. We then focus only on the users who would be very disappointed without our product, and we analyze their answers to question 3, which is what is the main benefit you receive from the product? And here are some example answers for Superhuman. Processing email is much faster. I get through my inbox in half the time. The app is crazy fast. The UX and the shortcuts make me feel like an actual superhuman. So much faster than Gmail, more efficient with my time. Speed, aesthetics, I can do everything from the keyboard, and so on and so on. And what I like to do is to create a big word cloud, and it becomes as clear as day. People, at least back then, it's obviously changed, it's a lot more AI-centric now, but people back then loved Superhuman for speed and focus and keyboard shortcuts. And what we want to do is we want to grow the percentage of people who are very disappointed. We got from 22% to 32%, but now we want to keep on growing it. And this is the nuance. As painful as it is, we have to ignore the not disappointed crowd because they are so far from loving the product that they are essentially a lost cause. This is important because they're going to ask for all kinds of distracting things. And as counterintuitive as it may feel, do not act on their feedback. That leaves just the somewhat disappointed crowd. And naturally, we ask, well, maybe we can help them fall in love with our product. And we most certainly can. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, do not act directly on their feedback because many of them are going to remain somewhat disappointed no matter what you do for them. Their requests are just distracting. So how do you decide who to listen to? And here's the magic. We use the main benefit of the very disappointed users to segment the somewhat disappointed users. So I'll give you the Superhuman example. We can take the somewhat disappointed users and separate them into 2 groups. First, the group for whom speed and aesthetics and keyboard shortcuts were not the main benefit. I strongly advise that you ignore these people because the main benefit didn't resonate with them. Even if you built every single thing that they asked for, they still would be unlikely to fall in love with your product. But second, you will have the other parts, the somewhat disappointed users for whom speed was the main benefit. Pay very special attention to those because the main benefit does resonate and something, I would wager something quite small, holds them back. Now the question is then, how do you figure out what? Easy. Just analyze their responses to the 4th and final question, which is how can we improve our product for you? And as before, I love to create a word cloud. For us, back in 2017, it was obvious, at least to begin with. It was the lack of a mobile app, which we of course since addressed. But then it became way less obvious and way more interesting. Things like integrations and attachment handling and calendaring and better search and read receipts and so on into the long tail. So to increase your product's market fit score, all you have to do is build these things. That would then convert those users who are only somewhat disappointed without our product into fanatics who love our product. And then that brings you to step 4, which is to implement, because we now understand why users love our product. We now understand what holds users back. And to increase our product's market fit score, we need to build these things. However, there are more minefields here. To increase our product's market fit score, we should spend half our time doubling down on what users love. In the Superhuman case, even more speed, even more shortcuts, efficiency, aesthetics. These days, it's all about AI. And just as importantly, we should spend half our time systematically addressing what holds users back. Here's the problems I see founders and product leaders run into. If we only double down on what users love, as vision-driven founders or vision-driven product leaders tend to do, we would not increase our product market fit score because we're just building more of the same. But if we only address objections as scaled companies tend to do, because someone in the room is like, hey, let's listen to the data, or as data-driven teams tend to do, then a competitor will eventually overtake you and outmagic you. They'll do something special that no one in the room thought to do. So this is your new roadmap. Half on one, half on the other. It automatically writes itself, and it's basically guaranteed to increase the product market fit score number. And that then brings us on to the fifth and the final stage of the product market fit engine, which is to track. And I will say that this framework will work, but there are no silver bullets. As you double down on what users love and as you address what holds users back, you should constantly survey new users. I think it's Andrew Chen with the law of shitty metrics. Basically, every metric comes down over time as you're focusing on growing and you have lower intent users, you have users who are maybe adjacent to the users you already had from adjacent industries or adjacent personas. So I recommend tracking your PMF score every week, every month, every quarter. And it really does work. For Superhuman, in the summer of 2017, our PMF score was 33%. After a quarter, it was 47%. A quarter after that, it was 56%. And a quarter after that, it was 58%. At the time, 58% of our users would be very disappointed without Superhuman. And of course, it wobbles up and down. If we have a big growth spurt, it's going to come down, but then we can look at those users, figure out what they need, what they're saying, and equally what not to listen to, and bring it back up again. I know that was a lot, but that's the product market fit engine. I've written this all up in great length. If you just Google Superhuman product market fit engine, you'll find it.
This is such a great, clean, and objective way of articulating or productizing product market fit that I was just literally taking notes. So thank you, Rahul. And that takes me to the next point. I think some people in the audience might be thinking, well, but I work at Google or large company. I'm a director of product. And they just are finding all kinds of excuses to either justify why there is product market fit already, so this doesn't apply to them, or why, well, I'm not the actual decision maker, so I'll wait for my boss to do it. I remember a conversation I had on the podcast with then president of Brex, Karandeep. He's now the CEO at Character.ai. He was saying that product market fit is a moving target. And I think you nailed that, right? Like there's always new competitors. Some of your features might become commodities, and you're always like looking for that next reason to really objectively be proud of your product. How do we structure that for the folks that are in larger orgs, might be looking for excuses to say, well, this doesn't apply to me?
Wow. You raised so many good points. So I'm going to try and untangle them a little bit. One is, what do I do if I'm in a larger org? How do I influence around product market fit? Another is product market fit changing over time. And then you also mentioned, what if I'm not the decision maker? Which, by the way, can equally apply in a small org. You could be a seed or a Series A startup head of product, but maybe it's the founder or the CEO that you need to convince. And I've seen all of these patterns. So first of all, on product market fit being a moving target or not, it absolutely is a moving target. And if there's one thing that you take away from my long speech on how to do it is, remember, it goes up and it will come down. What goes up must come down, in a sense, especially if you're trying to scale. It will inherently do that, and you have to constantly keep on working on it. So whether I'm in a large organization or not, I would probably lead with that. Like if someone says, oh, we have product market fit for this product, let's do XYZ, or let's just iterate it, or let's just kind of work around the edges while we go and do something else. That is the perfect time to remind everyone that product market fit never lasts forever. And in fact, with that kind of attitude, it is easily lost. As I think about Superhuman Mail, and I've been in this game for a long time. I founded the company at the beginning of 2014. So I've seen various forms of product market fit come and go. And the product still has product market fit today, but it's for different reasons than it had product market fit back in the day. Some of those reasons change, some stay the same. I think it's worth having a very clear sense of, as you think about your product, what kinds of things are moats? what are really, really hard to build, what will no one else ever bother to build, versus what will eventually everyone build. And as I think about Superhuman, there are some things that are really hard to copy. It's really hard to make an app that is fast. It's very easy to say my app is fast. It's very, very hard to do it. And it's very hard to do it because it's hard to create the incentive structures. It's not just shipping features. It's like products market fit. It's a well, actually, unlike products market fit, you can measure it very, very easily. Like you can define what fast means, you can build the infrastructure, you can build the dashboards, but it's hard to make an organization care about fast. It's hard to incentivize people on fast in a world where people are generally rewarded on shipping features or trying to keep up with the competition along certain dimensions. It is, especially when people don't complain about slow, it's very hard to build fast. But I believed in it because I knew it was a positioning that we could occupy. And I heard people complain so much about how slow Gmail is and how slow Outlook is. Even if what they meant was the workflow was slow, I knew that a fast application would go a long way to alleviating that pain. And to date, even though people have had more than a decade, no one has competed on that dimension. No one has competed along the keyboard shortcut dimension. So it's worth knowing what's going to be a long-term moat, but at the same time, also know that when it comes to features, they'll all be copied. Features get copied all the time. That's actually what most competition do. It's what most unsophisticated competition do, and you have to be ready for that. How do you get ready for that? Well, you use a framework like the one I just mentioned. Okay, so back to some of the other things you mentioned. What happens if you are in an organization where you're not the decision maker, or you're in a large organization and there are these maybe complacency feelings around product market fit? Run the goddamn survey, get the data. Maybe it's not as good as you think it is. And maybe there are plenty of people who are kind of only using it out of momentum or inertia or because their boss bought it. But you know that when they graduate and they get their boss's job at some other company, they're not buying your software again. They're going to run a full search and they're going to buy the competition. It is so important that we know the truth, we have the data, and we know what really is going on, because then we can take that data to the decision makers, to the stakeholders, and actually start to make change.
Rahul, to that point, I would add that as a CEO, there's nothing I like more than someone pushing back on me or criticizing what we're building, because I know it comes from a place of care. The same way, there's nothing I hate more than people running around creating dashboards with graphs that only go up and to the right.
But I do like those dashboards. They, if ever I'm feeling down, I pull up and to the right dashboard. But I hear you. Like as a leader myself, like I can be stubborn. Like I can have a very clear founder-like vision, but there is one very, very easy way to change my mind, and that is show me the data.
Now, here is the thing around data, right? And we can talk about anecdotal data as well. And I think you as a founder have that sense, as well as the agency, to say, you know what, I don't trust this data. Or I still believe that there is something else that we can do, even though the data seems to be good enough. So how do you kind of disagree with your own data, or find spaces to go with your gut?
I go with my gut all the time. I mean, people who, when I say data, I mean data with a lowercase d, not an uppercase d. I'm not asking people to go survey thousands of users. I'm just like, go talk to 20 users, run the product market fit engine. There's a reason we built it. It's a really, I think logically it holds together better than any other framework I've seen in the space. And there's a reason it's become the standard for how do you measure and work on product market fit. But I don't need data with a capital D. I love anecdotes. I love reading what customers think. But when it comes to anecdotes, I have a high bar. It has to be verbatim what the customer said. And, be careful about asking leading questions. Ask questions appropriately. Try not to bias your users. And it has to be verbatims, because there is nothing more real than words of the customer. As astute listeners and viewers would have heard in the product market fit engine, you can then turn those words into the description of the highest expectation customer. You can actually also turn those words into product marketing copy. This is kind of outside the scope of your question, but one of the powerful things about the product market fit engine is when it comes to product marketing the features after we've built them, when we're trying to figure out what do we name this, how do we talk about this, what are the value propositions, or at least how do we talk about the value propositions and the benefits to users. It's all from the original survey. It's all the actual words that users used, because those are the words that resonate the most. So anyway, back to your question. I don't need large amounts of data. I just need anecdata is fine, but it really needs to get to the heart of the actual problems. And what I'll do with those dozens of user quotes is I'll sit down with the PM and I'll go really deep. I'll be like, what do you think they thought here? This customer, when you went deep on them with this, what was the actual problem? Or with this quote, I think they're asking for a faster horse, but what they really need is a car. And here's what I think a car is. What do you think? And I think that's my role as the editor of the product, is to push the designers and the PMs really hard on the interpretation of the data with a lowercase d.
And Rahul, just to wrap up with this, and very curious about how you get yourself some leverage. Because I know that you spread yourself thin to get enough depth in certain areas. I heard from you that the marketing or the product marketing copy is something that you take a lot of pride on, right? And you still edit, or you are in the product review. So in order to be able to cover that much ground, how do you get yourself that type of leverage?
I'll give the answer for me, but honestly, it's going to be different for every leader. I greatly believe in the zone of genius idea, the idea that all of us, if we're great at what we do, we have certain areas that are our zones of genius, things that we can viably claim to be world class at. For me, it's product, design, marketing. I'm not obviously across the board. I'm not claiming to be a unicorn, but there are some aspects of each of those three things where I genuinely believe I can play on the world stage. And that's about it. I am not great at recruiting. I am not good at managing, as the people who have been managed by B will tell you. I am not great at execution, particularly organization. Um, I'm a good leader, but I'm not necessarily a great founder. So what I've done over the years is I've built an organization around me where we've hired people who are excellent at all the things that I am not excellent at. And that, I think, is how you build leverage. That's how anyone builds leverage, or at least it's the smart way to do it. It's the efficient way to do it. You don't necessarily, I think it's, you want your job to remain fun and to create joy. I like to get into flow state at least every day. I don't want to delegate those things necessarily because I have value to add and I'm really good at doing them. And equally, I want people to do the things that I would otherwise just be mediocre at. It sounds obvious, but very few people actually do this. People think, oh, I should delegate the things that are taking my time, or I should delegate the things that I'm really good at so I can go and solve our hardest problems. I mean, maybe, yeah, there is some merit to that thought as well, but it's a different philosophy, and mine has worked for me.
I agree, and I learned some of that the hard way. 'Cause I love that book, Atomic Habits and the Zone of Genius, and I realized, man, I get a lot of energy. I get into the flow state with similar things to you, actually, product, design, marketing. But at the same time, there's a certain expectations with that come with the title, founder or CEO, and I think that being selfish and really making that definition work for you and not just try to apply the standard job description and kind of be miserable in your role is something that requires a lot of self-awareness, and and it works.
Yeah, totally. One thing I realized at around the Series B stage is you get to decide what CEO means at your company, especially if you're the founder. If you're the founder CEO, it is completely your decision what founder CEO means, and you can hire around you in any shape and configuration that you want. Now, of course, when you're a seed Series A stage company and maybe you don't have traction or you don't have a brand name or whatever, you can't just go hire your Sheryl Sandberg, right? Like you need something to get the best people into your company. But once you have traction, once things are working, once you have some cash in the bank, you really can design the organization any which way you want. And there was a moment where before this realization, I thought that as a venture-backed CEO, Series B, I had to be spending 30% of my time on recruiting. And if I wasn't, I was in some way doing it wrong. But here's the thing, I'm just really, really bad at that task. And one day I woke up and I was like, why am I grinding away on this thing I'm just terrible at doing? What if I built an organization that was great at doing this, but which didn't need me doing it all the time? What if I just threw out this idea that there is one true way to be a founder CEO? Because that's kind of BS. There isn't one true way. There's a best way for you, and that's going to look different. That's going to look different to how it looks for everybody else.
Well, Rahul, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. It just took us a year to make it happen, but it was definitely worth it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.